Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist congregation at Willamette Falls. In just a moment, I'm going to light our chalice. By now, you have probably found your chalices or your candles. I'm going to ask Allison if she would come down and light our chalice behind me, right over my shoulder. It'll be great. Thank you. I bet a lot of you know these words by heart. Will you say them with me? Whoever you are, wherever or whatever you come from, you are welcome here, where we are invited into connection and inspired to spiritual growth. Let us leave this hour together, refreshed anew, ready to ignite action for justice in the wider world. Our opening words this morning are from the Reverend Gretchen Healy, who writes, "Roll away the stone of your hesitant heart. Let the light shine on all the sleeping shadows. Awaken to this day that offers itself to you and to all as a gift. Awaken to this beauty that persists, this chance that we might begin again. That even here we are finding our way to healing and hope. That even now we are changed by the in and out of breath, the rhythm we forge across screens and comment sections, the recreation of community, the remembering of how to grieve together, woven through loving, that we might still surprise this earth with a new song, sung together, calling us all in, and before long, sending us back out to life. Come, let us worship together." Now is the time in our service where we would generally pass the plates and take an offering. We will remind you that you can go to our website at UUCWF.org and scroll down to the bottom of the front page, and there is a donate button, and you are welcome to donate. You're welcome to mail in checks to the church. Tricia is coming in the mornings and walking around to make sure everything's going okay with the building and depositing checks. And we still continue to run in these very strange times and strange ways and doing the best that we can. Our joys and sorrows today, I'm going to do this here. David Kiefer writes in that his daughter-in-law, Ashley, is a first-year resident doctor working in New Brunswick, New Jersey, doing 12-hour shifts with mostly COVID-19 patients, with just one set of protective gear each shift. We hold Ashley and all doctors and nurses and hospital workers in our thoughts at this time. If you have a joy or sorrow that you didn't write in to me, you are welcome to type it in the chat as well. Judy Hansen writes that her dear friend of 68 years, Don Jones, suffered a stroke and a seizure this week and is on hospice in his rural home in Virginia. We hold Judy and Don. We light a candle for Pat Thayer, John Young's mom, who died on Thursday morning. We hold her and the Young family in our hearts. And a friend of Ashley's, our pianist, went into the hospital with an ectopic pregnancy last night. And one of the really difficult things in hospitals right now is that because of COVID-19, a lot of people are having to go into the hospital and aren't allowed to take anyone with them. And so this woman had to deal with an ectopic pregnancy without her husband there. And that was a really hard thing. We hold Ashley and her friend. And finally, we celebrate Michael and Ellen Steins today. and the amazing job that they have done leading our congregation's participation in the Hope Food Pantry for more than 16 years now. They are retiring from that job, and we would be powerfully lucky to have some folks step up to take on pieces of that work. And Michael and Ellen, we appreciate you so much and your hard work. Thank you. We have a tradition in our religious education classes where the children and youth in RE put stones in the Joys and Sorrows face, and then they pour water in, and the water represents the community, and that all the joys and concerns are held in the loving bonds of this community. Thanks. Will you pray with me? Spirit of life and love, Easter is a time of hope and resurrection and joy and celebration. There is joy. There are things to celebrate. And it feels a little more like a Good Friday world right now. We are facing the isolation of the empty tomb. We are not able to get together with those we love at their hardest moments. And that is hard. We are grateful that technology can help us gather in these difficult times. We are grateful that we can stay connected even as we stay home. We know how important it is to stay home, but it's not an easy thing to do. May we know that we are all in this together, Holy One. That we have each other, even as we long to see the sparkle in each other's eyes and feel the warmth of a hug in real life. We will come out of the tomb. We will be together again, and hope continues always. Blessed be, and amen. We are lucky today that Allison is going to sing for us. Thank you, Allison. That was lovely. In all of this, I completely missed the time for all ages. We'll get there now. And so now, if the children want to come forward or gather around, you are welcome to. And we are going to talk about the almond tree. And this is a story about a woman named Talia. Talia's face was like a complicated map, full of ridges and wrinkles and lines. Her back was bent over, and when she walked, she shuffled. But she had a twinkle in her eye, and she always had a kind word for her neighbors and her children and her grandchildren and even her great-grandchildren. She spent most of her days in her rocking chair, looking out over her garden. If she had a visitor, she'd share memories of the good old days. And when she was alone, she'd remember to herself, and every now and then she'd wiggle her fingers and tap her toes. It was during one of those mornings alone that Talia surprised herself by coming up with a rather ambitious idea. She made a phone call, and a few hours later, when the doorbell rang, the delivery man was very patient while she slowly shuffled her way to the door. She directed him to carry the tall, very skinny parcel that he had brought to a bare corner of the garden. He kindly helped her find the garden spade and pull a lawn chair over, and then she paid him and waved him off. Slowly, very slowly, she dug a hole in the ground. It was hard work, and now and then she'd sit on the lawn chair for a while to take a break. But she kept getting up time after time, and eventually the hole was just the right size. And slowly, very slowly, she shuffled and rotated the bottom of the tall, skinny parcel into the hole and went kaplunk. She sat back down to inspect it and was satisfied. She unwrapped that tall, skinny parcel after she pushed the dirt into the hole. Do you know what it was? It was a beautiful sapling tree. She sat down once again to admire it. And about then, her neighbor came home and looked over the fence and said, "Talia, what are you doing? Planting a tree at your age? Is it an almond tree? It won't make almonds for years." And Talia laughed and pointed at a very old tree in the opposite corner of her garden. Some of its branches were broken off, and others were bent with age. Most of them were bare, even though it was the middle of spring. And she said, "I am like that old almond tree. My great-grandmother planted it. I loved to climb in it when I was little. Its branches were broad and strong, and I felt so safe there. And then when I was a young woman, I would pick some of its pink blossoms and put them in my hair. I think that's how my husband noticed me." The neighbor began to smile. As usual, there was no stopping Talia when she was telling a story. She said, "When I was a mother, I would pick the almonds and roast them and serve them to my family. When I was a grandmother, I rested in the shade of the almond tree. And now I am a great-grandmother. I have lots of time on my hands as I sit and remember and look out my window. Mostly I am happy with my life, but I realized that I had never planted a tree. It just didn't seem right. I have great-grandchildren." "Great-grandchildren?" asked the neighbor. Talia exclaimed, "Yes, and they need an almond tree." "Of course," laughed the neighbor, and she pledged herself to do something for her great-grandchildren, though she did not know what that something would be. I wonder what it will be. Maybe she too will plant a tree. And as for Talia, after planting her tree, she sat back down in her rocking chair to look out from her window, and she smiled. Resurrection, my friends, is everywhere. Now we are going to have our reading. We are really lucky today in that our reading was written by one of our own members. Skylar Freeman wrote this and posted it on Facebook, and then she sent it to me, and I said, you know what? I think that'll work for Easter. It's called Affliction. And she writes, this chair is so soft. My flaccid body feels sustained by the loving arms of Sam. My name for Spirit, Source, Allah, Almighty, Yahweh, God. And look at that sky, searing lavenders and yellows and blues and pinks to pleasure my greedy eyes. They feed that sweet space between the eyebrows where they say a soul resides. I've got a satisfying book as well. It stimulates the white matter inside my skull with killer words of wisdom and poetry and tales that keep me turning pages as light turns to dark and time to brush my teeth. But best of all, there's love. It keeps the heart beating and determined to stay alive through this terrible time of suffering and death and fear and quarantine that paradoxically isolates us and brings us together in one distraught mass. I wonder what to do, where to find the strength I need to help and just survive. And the answer that comes is nothing. There is only the opening of arms, surrendering to what is. There is only patience and goodwill to all. There is only faith and trust in the divinity of disaster, the equalizer, and the ruthless wisdom of whatever we believe that helps us hold our faith in the resiliency of Earth's spawn and in the righteousness that feels so wrong until the slaughter ends. Then, what emerges will be up to us. When it's over, then, let us create a collective of dreamers and believers and commit ourselves to light, to goodness and kindness, to ending pollution and welcoming all creatures back to a newly purified earth, and to healing from all the harm we've felt and done by holding our hearts in our hands and replacing the virus of fear with love. For those of us whose spirits have chosen to move on, I trust they are at peace. To those of us remaining and tasked with cleanup, we will be here to witness and usher in a new life. It could be beautiful, I think. It may feel like more than we deserve, but we can earn it by staying awake in ways we never have before. So on this day, let's hold a space for the future. There's nothing to keep us from manifesting it, but our own small and greedy selves, and hopefully the virus will take them too. Then when our feet are firmly planted on this new world and we see how and what we have changed, we will love what's left and what is new, and yes, I believe it will be beautiful. Thank you, Skylar. On Easter Sunday, Christians around the world celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, a human being, the Son of God, who was born and lived a fairly short but deeply meaningful life, teaching, healing, and bringing liberation to the poor and oppressed of his time. The stories that we tell about Jesus depend on who we are and what we need. There are folks who lean into the Jesus of John's gospel. There is no way to the Father except through me, and whosoever shall believe in me will have everlasting life. There are many ways to lean into these stories. There are those who have had hard lives, sinned and been lost, who lean into these words as a source of redemption and hope. There are those who believe that everything they are and hope to become comes through God, and that by trusting in Him, they will be saved. All of us want to be known as something more than our own worst action. I can think of times when I have been unkind or even cruel, and I bet if you examine your own sibling relationships, I bet you can come up with your own examples. What a comfort to be more than just our worst moments. To be confident that there is something better than this that we have to look forward to. But it is too easy for people, particularly in this country, to believe that white, rich American Christians were somehow chosen by God, that the only sins that count are sexual in nature, that sin is personal and not societal, and that what matters is what you believe and not how you act. The Jesus that gets spoken about the loudest in these contexts is not the Jesus that I recognize from reading the Gospels. The Jesus that I recognize from reading the Gospels is a man who taught things that we wouldn't want to do on a bet. Give up everything you have and follow me? That's a lot harder. Feed the hungry, clothe the naked, visit the prisoner, not just on alternate Tuesdays, but as a way of life. Love your neighbor, even the one that really gets on your nerves, the same way you love yourself. Jesus' liberation tactics are hard. He spoke of upending the power structures of his time, not just by quietly serving, but by challenging the domination systems. One of the stories that shocks us a bit is in Matthew, where Jesus goes to the temple and drives out the moneylenders and those selling birds and animals for offerings. He upends the tables. He drives away the folks profiting from the temples away. In John's story, he even uses a whip. This isn't the way we picture white Jesus. It's not coming through very well, but I think you know what I mean. White Jesus is a really meek guy, not too threatening, approachable, the kind of guy you'd want to have a glass of wine with. The guy who makes you feel like you should be a better person, but maybe just with a slightly disapproving glance. But the Jesus that I want to talk about today is the one that we could follow if we dared. Not worship. I love that delineation that our Transylvanian Unitarians cousins use. We follow Jesus, we don't worship him. Austin Channing Brown, a Black woman, writes in her book, I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness, writes of when, after her predominantly white Christian school, she began attending a Black church. She writes of people's friendliness to her and her family, of seeing faces that looked like hers in the choir loft, and of the soaring music. And she writes, that day I fell in love. I fell in love with the soaring voices and the songs that moved us to tears and then chased the blues away. I fell in love with peppermint-dealing church mothers and hymn-singing deacons. I fell in love with fiery preaching that moved so deep it would undergird you and push you to your feet in praise. I fell in love with a Jesus who saw the poor and sick and hurting, a Jesus who had bigger plans for me than keeping me a virgin, a Jesus who loved and reveled in our Blackness. Sunday after Sunday, what grabbed my attention more than anything was the pastor. In sermons he preached, Jesus sounded like a Black person, dealing with familiar hardships of life, injustice, broken relationships, the pain of being called names. Pastor would read a scripture of poetry filled with these and thous, but then he would take the time to restate it to sound like it was made in the present day. Any given Sunday, the message was clear: God is with us. Brown continues that it took until she was an adult to hear about James Cone and Black liberation theology, but that she'd been introduced to that Jesus at age 10 in the Black church. There, she writes, Jesus cared about my soul, but he also cared about the woman who didn't have transportation or couldn't pay the light or the water bill. Jesus cared about the folks who were addicted to drugs or alcohol, who wanted to save their bodies from the poison and their hearts from pain. And for those whose families hurt us, or significant others had left us, or supervisors didn't understand us, but all those things were taken very seriously. But every Sunday, we were also reminded that trouble don't last always. Heartbreak and struggle were not the end of our story. I am not trying to co-opt Black Jesus, but I think we have a lot to learn about Jesus as liberator if we understand that none of us have it all together. If we understand that none of us are all together all of the time. We Unitarian Universalists aren't always the greatest at admitting that. And I truly believe that this is one of those both and cases that we are slamming a lot into and that I'll preach about on Mother's Day. Yes, we are whole and holy and beloved. And yes, we are broken at the same time. Yes, we are lucky and blessed, and it could be so much worse. And yes, we are isolated in our homes and nothing is normal, and sometimes that is really, really hard. And most importantly, we don't have to do it alone. As relatively privileged people, we sometimes have the idea that we're just fine on our own, that we can earn enough money to take care of ourselves and our families. One of the shocks but ultimate lessons in this virus is that we are more dependent than we thought. Did we actually realize how important grocery store workers are? CNAs? Bus drivers? I do bet that our parents are thinking that teachers and daycare staff are criminally underpaid after this. The Reverend Sarah Lawal writes of Good Friday, "It is a story that is told and retold throughout the ages. A rebel, a reformer, a zealot is branded by those in power, pursued by the ruling empire for upending the status quo, and he is put to death in front of the whole city. In the case of Jesus of Nazareth, this meant the death of more than just a person, but the death of an ideal, a movement, a person clinging to hope. The hope for a faith that privileges the poor, the sick, the vulnerable, society's outcasts. A faith offering blessings and welcome to all. It meant proclaiming the eternal, salvific love of God. And for that, they made plans to put a man to death." She continues, "It is not so different from the time we're in now. We know what is coming. We're hearing about it and reading about it, and we feel it, though for some of us, it doesn't feel quite real. Even though we don't quite understand it, we feel powerless. This thing is coming. It is already here. This thing that will take away life and has by the thousands, and all we can do is shelter in place. Many of us have been down this road with sick and dying loved ones, playing that waiting game, knowing that the end is near and uncertain of what to do. Looming grief brings so much uncertainty and so many questions. What will my life be after this moment? Like Jesus' disciples and the people of his day, we are anticipating grief. And rather than ignore it or fight it or even betray it, we might, as Jesus imagined with the Last Supper, welcome it. We might explore what it has to teach us. What if, in all the confusion, fear, uncertainty, sadness, what if after we've eaten the bread and drank the wine, the symbols of sustenance and nurture and comfort, what if we sit with our questions, with the questions inspired by a love larger than life itself, by a ministry of grace and hope? What if, in the darkness, we get still and let the questions come? How will our hearts answer? Schuyler Freeman answered some of these questions in her poem, writing, "So on this day, let's hold a space for that future. There's nothing to keep us from manifesting it but our own small and greedy selves, and hopefully the virus will take them too. Then when our feet are firmly planted in this new world, and we will see how and what we have changed, we will love what's left and what is new, and yes, I believe it will be beautiful." On this Easter Sunday, dear ones, I invite you to imagine what could be, not in fear, not in panic, but in love and hope and celebration for the liberation of all. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. I invite you to settle into your own couch or chair or patch of grass, wherever you are right now. Take a deep breath. We're at least making different mistakes this worship service. We have the bell. And sink into a moment of silence. I am so very lucky with the people I work with. We are so very blessed to have flexible and warm and talented staff here. Amy O'Brien, who would be running our camera, and trust me, I'd look better on that camera, and Allison and Ashley, who are providing our music, and my daughter Marcella, who is really doing her best to make this all work. It is not her fault, I promise. Oh, my friends. And isn't that what Easter is about? Isn't Easter about new ways of doing things? We can extinguish our chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And our benediction today comes from my friend, the Reverend Jordan Nelson Long, who writes, "We will rise, and someday we will re-inhabit the beautiful spaces of our shared public lives. In the meantime, perhaps it is also a gift to hold the weight and know the value of those things we yearn for. Perhaps this Easter, our primary task is not to mistake unfinished hopes for unrequited ones. Go in peace, my friends, and go in such love. Blessed be, and amen."